Good evening, everyone. I hope you guys were able to enjoy the lovely weather outside. It's Michelle again from Toronto Right to Life. This past few days, we have been learning about how to have effective conversations on abortion. We also learned the importance of exposing the injustice in order to change the culture. We also heard from Munita Law and MP Kathy Wagenthal on Bill C-233 and how we can support the bill in order to illegalize sex-selective abortions, which happen in our country. Earlier today, I also had the opportunity to had a conversation with Mary Helen Mose from Aid to Women to learn more how we can support mothers who are facing a crisis pregnancy. Tonight, we'll focus on how we can reach and talk to people who have been wounded by abortion. So, I'll share with you the lessons I've learned from my experience of doing activism, from my experience of talking to countless of people about abortion on the streets of Toronto, and from the experience of my friends and colleagues who have been doing activism for a number of years now. I want to start by sharing with you a conversation that I had about a couple years ago while doing activism. I reached out to this young lady and I asked her what she thought about abortion. She said that she wasn't sure and she's never thought about it before. And so I went through the human rights argument with her. I said, "Do you believe in human rights?" And she said, "Yes." Then I asked, "Who gets human rights?" And she said that everyone should have human rights. I agreed with her that all human beings should have human rights. Then I asked another question, and I said, "If two human beings reproduce, what species will their offspring be?" And she thought for a moment, and she said, "Well, human." I said, "You're right. Human parents will always have human offspring." And so, if all human beings have human rights, I said, and we know from science that human parents will always reproduce after their own kind, doesn't it logically follow? And I pointed to the brochure that I had in my hand that shows an abortion victim at around 10 weeks. Doesn't it logically follow that abortion that kills this young human being is a human rights violation? And she looked at that photo and she said, "Yeah, this is wrong." And to clarify if she really agreed that abortion is wrong, I said, "Do you think there's any circumstance that could justify doing this to another human being?" And she said, "No, this is wrong." And then we shook hands and she thanked me for that conversation. That young lady simply needed to see the truth about abortion in order to understand that abortion is a human rights violation. Now compare that to the conversation I had with a pro-choice woman last year while doing activism at PAPE and Danforth. I noticed her that she stopped just across us. She took her phone out, started taking photos of us. And after a few seconds later, it seemed like she started doing a live stream video. She was calling her friends to counter protest us and block our signs. And when I noticed that, I pointed my video camera at her and I kept my eyes on her just to make sure that all our members are saved. And then she started accusing us of the photos being fake. And she yelled a few times that abortion is a woman's right. Now, I wasn't sure whether or not to engage with her because I knew that we were ending in a few minutes. But when she calmed down a bit, I thought to myself, maybe I'll ask her about the life signs, the life signs that I was holding. I was holding a photo of a healthy preborn child, just like the one you see on my slide. And so I said, "Hi, what do you think about this photo? This is from an embryology textbook. Do you think this is also fake?" And she hesitated to answer that question, but finally she said, "Well, it's an embryo." I agreed with her that it is a human embryo. Then I asked, "Imagine that human embryo torn apart into pieces through an abortion. What would that human embryo look like? And she avoided answering that question. And I noticed that she started getting agitated. Then she started raising her voice, saying that pro-lifers are bad people, pro-lifers shame women, and that she wanted to become an abortion doula in order to help women who are facing a difficult circumstance. She started and she was visibly getting emotional. Now, when you compare those two conversations, you'll notice that there's a huge difference in the way the young woman in the first conversation and the pro-choice woman in the second one reacted and responded when they saw the evidence of who the preborn child is and what abortion does to them. When people don't know the truth about abortion and they hear the pro-life message, they become enlightened, which is a reaction of the head. But when people are hurting, they might respond to the pro-life message with some form of agitation, which is a reaction of the heart. And that's why often I remind myself that when I'm speaking to someone who is angry or upset, that anger could be a mask of pain. It is easier in a way to be angry at someone than to be vulnerable and share one's pain with another person. We need to remember that with 100,000 of abortions that happen every year, it is likely that we meet someone who has been wounded by abortion. You might find yourself in a conversation where, even though you presented all the facts, all the evidence, all the arguments against abortion, and though the person seemed to understand everything, the person keeps denying that abortion is wrong. They wouldn't agree with you. They wouldn't change their mind. That's because sometimes the person you're talking to is not ignorant of the truth, but rather they're in denial of the truth. And these are signs that the person in front of you might be dealing with an issue of the heart, a heart issue. They support abortion because in order to protect someone they love who had one, or maybe they themselves have had an abortion. And that's why we need to tailor our approach so that we can reach people where they're at, address whatever wounds they may be carrying that's preventing them from accepting a difficult truth. When you're having conversations on abortion in person or online, keep in mind our primary goal. And that is to win over people, not arguments. Because it is winning people that will end abortion in our lifetime. Now, there is no blueprint for how we can approach hard conversations, but there are 3 key things that I want you to remember. And those are to understand, to love, and to inspire. Now, there are also 3 other things that you learned from Apologetics 101 that Justina gave on Tuesday night. If you missed it, no worries. It is posted on our Facebook page, and you can find all the details on our website as well. In Apologetics 101, we learned how to build common ground, use analogies and stories, and to ask lots of questions. Those 3 things are also helpful when dealing with a hard conversation. And you'll notice that I'll be using those when sharing some conversations later. So, the first thing that we need to remember when having a conversation about abortion, whether it's purely logical or maybe it's a hard conversation, the first thing that we need to do is to listen with the intent to understand. Sometimes it's so easy to miss what the person is trying to say because we get caught up thinking of the best way to respond. We're trying to think of, that research or that quote or that argument. And when that happens, we actually stop listening. But in order to truly understand or respond to someone, we need to be able to take the time to listen and try to understand where someone is coming from. Going back to the conversation I had with the pro-choice woman at Babe in Danforth, when I noticed that she was getting emotional, I didn't respond right away. I gave her the time to vent or rant, and I just listened really hard to what she was trying to say. I noticed that she really cared about women and children who are facing difficult situations, and that the abortion issue is very personal to her. When I finally had the chance to respond, I said, I can tell that you really care about women and children. And I agree with you that we need to do better to support women who are facing difficult pregnancies. Women deserve better than abortion. And so we talked about resources and also the impact of abortion on women. Unfortunately, we had to go. And as we were closing our signs, I told her, I'm sorry I have to go now, but I want to tell you thank you for talking to me. Thank you for your time. I was not hoping or expecting any kind of response, but surprisingly, she said, thank you for talking to me. I didn't think you would talk to me at all. And I agree with you that conversations on this issue are very important. And so, from someone who's angry, calling for her friends to block us, to someone who humbles herself and thank us for a simple and short conversation. And so that's the power of listening with the intent to understand and also finding common ground, especially with people who have been affected by the issue, who are very emotional to the when responding to the issue. Now, when you start to sense that there might be a heart issue, it is helpful to ask questions aimed at the heart. Questions aimed at the head ask what someone believes. So questions like, what do you think about abortion? Or do you believe in human rights? Questions aimed at the heart ask why someone believes what they believe. So here are sample questions that you can ask in order to help understand where someone is coming from. So you could ask something like, do you know someone who's had an abortion? And take note here that it is better and that we suggest that you ask indirectly, never ask the person directly, because it's harder to share your own personal story than someone else's story. So ask, do you know someone who's had an abortion? Or do you know someone who's experienced this situation? You could also ask, when did you first learn about abortion? Or something similar to that. When did you decide that you were pro-choice? Or you're really passionate about this. Where does your passion come from? And you could tell that these questions are aimed at understanding why someone believes what they believe. And by asking these questions, hopefully we can help someone open up to us. And when we understand their story, we can reach them better and respond to them better as well. I remember talking to 3 pro-choice students at George Brown College while doing activism. One of them was very outspoken. She was insulting us and she kept questioning our intentions for being there. I found common ground with them. I went through the human rights argument. We addressed difficult circumstances. We also talked about the science of human development. And they seemed to understand everything. One of them even said, and I quote, even if it was a child, how do you expect a student like me to care for that child? And after talking for them for a while, I thought to myself, okay, maybe I'll ask a different kind of question. And so I asked the most outspoken student and said, I can tell that you really care about women and children who are in difficult situations. Why are you so passionate about this issue? And she said, many of her friends and classmates have had an abortion. This student wasn't strongly pro-choice because she loves abortions. Rather, it's because she loves her friends and classmates who've had one. And so we talked about the impact of abortion on women and how we need to do better to support women who are facing difficult pregnancies. At the end, she said that she was no longer angry at me and said, "You seem like a really good person, and I support your right to share your message here." So, from someone who's very angry to someone who says, "I support you sharing the pro-life message on my campus." It's a huge change. That's what listening with the intent to understand could help, and finding common ground and being able to ask these questions so that we get to know the person better. Now, yes, she didn't completely change her mind that day, but I've shown her that she can come to what? She can come to pro-lifers and not end up hating each other. When we take a pause from responding to the logical arguments and we take the time to listen and focus on reaching the heart, I hope that we can truly start to see the person in front of us and recognize their story. And when we do that, we can show them that not only we love reborn children, but that we do love every human being, including the one in front of us. As Paul Tillich, a German theologian, said, "The first duty of love is to listen." And as we realize the wounds that someone may be carrying, it is important that we communicate and show love, because it is love that can heal a wounded heart. One of my favorite quotes is from Martin Luther King Jr. He says, "Whom you would change, you must first love, and they must know that you love them." Whom you would change, you must first love, and they must know that you love them. And we can practically show that love in a conversation by speaking with respect and kindness to everyone we meet. When people are angry or distressed, it is important that we don't respond with hostility. I remember having a conversation at Ryerson University where we were doing activism that day. And actually, these students were the ones who approached me. And I could tell from afar that they were upset and angry. And the student said, "Why do you keep coming back? No one wants you here. Why?" And thankfully, she gave me a chance to respond. And I explained to her our goals and our intent. I told her that we really cared about women and children. We believe that women deserve to know the truth about abortion, even though that might be difficult to hear, see, and accept. It's especially important for women to know the truth about abortion when they're about to make a life-changing decision. I told her how we need to do better to support women who are facing difficult pregnancies, and how for a lot of women, they usually are pressured to choosing an abortion, or that they're not given any other options, and that's why they end up choosing abortion. So I talked to her about why we're there and why we keep coming back, and the reasons for why we believe what we believe. Close to the end of the conversation, as she was just listening to me, she said, "Wow, I didn't realize how noble what you do here. Thank you." And so by not matching her voice, first of all, and by being able to communicate that we care, that we love people, that we're there to support people who are in difficult situations, she was able to see that we're not there to shame or condemn women. And she was able to understand the reason why we do activism. Another way that we can show love is through empathy. Now, what is empathy and how is that different from sympathy? I will play a video where Dr. Brené Brown explains artfully and effectively the difference between the two. And she will also give us some tips on how we can practice empathy. Dr. Brown is a research professor at the University of Houston, and she spent the past 2 decades studying courage, vulnerability, shame, and empathy. So let's have the video played where Dr. Brené Brown explains what empathy is.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you climb down. I know what it's like down here. And you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no. You want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. Yeah. And we do it all the time. Because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So, I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now, I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
So in the video, Dr. Brown says to empathize with someone is to be able to see the world as others see it, and to acknowledge what the person is going through by communicating it to them. Practically, we could do that by acknowledging someone's pain or hardship verbally, or by finding common ground. When someone opens up to you, these are phrases that you could say to communicate that you're listening, that you care, and to practice empathy. So you could say something like, I agree with you, that's very difficult. Or, I'm so sorry you had to go through that. You could also say, I could tell that you really care about women and children. You're really passionate about this issue. So these phrases communicate that, hey, I hear you. I hear your concerns. Oh, wow, I am listening to your story. Now, when someone is opening up about their story of pain or hardship, it's important to ask questions in order to understand the person better, and also to practice empathy again. So questions like, how are you doing now? Do you have a support system? What was it that made you choose abortion? Or what do you think that I think about you? Or something similar to that. Do you think that it's possible to love someone, but detest something that they've done? And I want to emphasize the importance of the last 2 questions, or the concept of being able to recognize the mistakes of the people we love does not mean we should stop loving them, or that person is no longer worthy of being loved. Or in Christian terms, to hate the sin but love the sinner. And I believe this concept has been lost in our culture today. And that's why many pro choicers think that if we hate abortions, we also hate women who've had one. And that's also why people think that if their mom or sister or best friend have had an abortion, they must also support abortion, even though they may recognize that abortion is awful and wrong. I was having a conversation with a student at U of T Scarborough while doing activism just a couple years ago. And that conversation was pretty logical. She seemed very smart. She understood the human rights argument. We went through the science of human development, and she seemed to understand everything. Though I did notice that she didn't show a lot of emotions, and she was really stuck when it came to difficult circumstances. Eventually, she opened up and said that her mom had an abortion before her because her mom was in a very difficult situation. And so I asked how her mom is doing and how she's doing. And she said, "Sometimes I don't know what to think of my mom's abortion." Then I asked her, "What do you think of someone like me who is against abortion? Think of your mom." And she said, "I don't know. Maybe you think she's a bad person." And so I told her that I don't. That even though I condemn the action of abortion and I am against abortion, I do believe that her mom deserves to be loved like anyone else. Close to the end of that conversation, when she had to go to class, she told me, "I want to come back and talk more because you really made me think." And that's why it's so important to communicate that truth that we can, yes, we hate abortions, but we can love people who've had abortions because there are so many people who don't know how to process that experience. Going back to the video, Dr. Brown adds that in order to connect with someone, we have to connect with something in ourselves that knows that feeling. Often, by sharing our story of our own struggles or story of someone we know who's gone through a similar situation, that can often help build connection with people. I usually share Angelina's story. Angelina is the national coordinator of Silent No More Awareness Campaign, and she's done street activism with us, and she's also spoken on many campuses here in Toronto. I share her story of hurt and healing from an abortion to communicate to people that though I've never had an abortion before, I can understand in some level how someone feels. And more importantly, to communicate that though I am against abortion, I love my friend Angelina, who's had an abortion before. Now, another way that we can show love is by simply offering practical help. And that's why our team always carry resources for pregnancy and post-abortion healing or help when we do activism. Now, when offering pregnancy support or post-abortion healing, we suggest that you don't force it onto people or directly offer it. Usually, asking the person is helpful. So, something like, may I offer you resources for pregnancy help or post-abortion healing? You may not need this now. However, in case you need it in the future, please know that there is help. So I would never force it onto someone or directly give it to them. So offer it in a polite way. Here are some resources that we know of that we usually have in hand when we're talking to people about abortion. So we usually carry these, or usually have these on our phones so we know who to contact right away. Now, as we love people who have been wounded by abortion, it is important that we don't forget to communicate the truth to them. Sometimes we shy away from sharing the truth about abortion because the truth can be hard to hear, see, and accept. However, to truly love someone, we must be truthful to them. As my friend Devora says, truth without love is ineffective, and love without the truth is a lie. Truth and love always go hand in hand. And so there might be times where we've the person has opened up and we're knowing the person better and we're realizing all the wounds and suffering that the person has gone through. There might be instances that we need to bring back the human rights argument carefully and with a lot of kindness and compassion in order for people to see again the truth without shame and condemnation. So that might be necessary. I want to share with you a conversation that I had about maybe 4 years ago while doing activism in downtown Toronto. We were doing Choice Chain at Lawrence Spadina. We just opened our signs when this young man approached me. And I asked him what he thought about abortion. And he said that he thought abortion is necessary, especially as a solution to difficult circumstances. And so I asked him why he was pro choice, why he believed that. And he said, and I quote, "I believe a man and a woman should be able to say no to their child." Those are his exact words. And I thought that was an odd response because people usually emphasize that abortion is a woman's right. Men are usually not in the equation. And so I went through the human rights argument with him. We talked about the science of human development and how we need to help women in difficult circumstances. And he seemed to understand everything. I also showed him a photo of an abortion victim, but I could tell that he didn't want to look at the photo. And so at some point I asked him, "Sir, do you know what an abortion is?" And he said, "Yeah, the baby stops growing." And I followed up and asked, "What does it mean when the baby stops growing?" And this young man said, "Well, the baby's dead." At that point, I was a little bit confused because he seemed to understand that abortion kills children, but would not agree that abortion is wrong. And so I've gone through so many things with him, and I realized we were going in circles. And to be honest with you, I gave up after an hour of talking with him. And I said, "You know what? Maybe I'd be more productive if I talked to another person." So I told him, "Sir, here's a brochure. Come back. Maybe you have some questions, and then we can talk more." He took that brochure, took a step back, but he did not leave. And that's when I realized that he really wanted to talk and that there might be a deeper reason for why he's okay with abortion. Soon I found the courage to ask him if he knew someone who's had an abortion. And he said, "Yes, my ex-girlfriend early this year." And I said, "I'm so sorry to hear that. How are you doing?" And he was quiet and he said, "I'm okay." And though he said those words, I saw the pain in his eyes and the sadness in his face. And he was just quiet. And so I shared with him that I have a friend, Angelina, who had an abortion and how she was not okay for many years. How abortion hurts people and it's okay not to be okay. And he was just nodding and listening. I shared with him that after receiving help, my friend is doing much better today. And so I encouraged him to also receive help and offered him the resources that we had. We also talk about how abortion doesn't solve the problems that we have, how abortion doesn't make a poor woman rich. I told him and I asked him, "If you don't mind me asking, did the abortion help your relationship with your ex-girlfriend?" And he said, "No, it made it worse." And so while getting to know him more and listening to his story, I noticed a change in his demeanor from someone who was defensive earlier to someone who is calm and relieved. And after talking with him for 2 hours, he said, "I want to have my own family someday. And I agree with you now." And I wasn't sure what exactly he meant. And so I asked, "Oh, what do you mean by that?" He said, "I agree with you that we can live without abortions. And one day, I will say yes to my child. And then he gave me the biggest smile I'd seen on his face during that conversation. And then he said goodbye to grab lunch. That young man knew what abortion did to his preborn child. What he needed to hear that day was someone who would listen to him and show him that there is hope and healing. Now, after we've communicated the truth and reached the heart with love, sometimes we need to go one step further. We need to inspire people to do what's good and what's right, even in the face of suffering, even when it's hard. It's important that we instill courage and hope in people to help them realize that they can move forward from their past, learn from it to be a better person in the future, and to help them realize that they can overcome whatever obstacles they're facing right now, and to help them see that there can be meaning in their suffering. I want to share with you the conversation that my friend Adam had last year while doing activism. Adam talked to this young lady while doing choice chain, and the girl brought up the issue of people not being ready to be parents. And so Adam agreed with her that that would be a very difficult circumstance, having a child when you're not ready. And then Adam asked her, what if the parents of a born child went from being ready to not being ready? Would it be okay to kill the born child? And this young lady said, well, obviously not. You can't do that. And so they talked about the difference between a preborn child and a born child. But she kept coming back to that circumstance of, the parents being not ready, and so the child will be born into unhealthy family, into a situation that isn't good. Eventually, she opened up to Adam that she her mom was a drug addict and that she was abused when she was a child. And Adam said, I'm so sorry to hear that. The young lady further said that, she had to get over that trauma on her own, but she does feel like it has made her a stronger person as a result. Adam commended her for her strength and for her courage for overcoming that situation. And then Adam explained to her that if she was aborted, this world would have been robbed of her testimony and her strength. She could use that strength and courage to help others who are suffering from an abusive home. And those people won't have to go through it alone. She also mentioned that when she first tried to open up about her past long ago, that people made fun of her, thinking that she was just, trying to seek attention. And so she closed herself off to people because of that. And so Adam said, imagine for a moment if the people you try to open up to had been through exactly what you've been through. How do you think they would have responded? And she said, they would have understood. Adam said, exactly. It is very unfortunate that you did not have someone who could understand what you went through. But think about the fact that you can be there for the next person who needs your help, who needs your courage. And you'd be able to understand them because you went through something similar. And you can expedite their healing process by sharing with them your strength. I believe God has a purpose for you. It involves using your past sufferings to alleviate the pain of people who are suffering in the future. Abortion would have robbed those people of your strength. At the end of the conversation, she agreed that abortion doesn't actually solve the problem of suffering, that it's better to get rid of the source of the suffering rather than the person who is suffering. And she was very encouraged by the conversation, what we do. She took a pamphlet and thanked Adam for the conversation, and he told her to keep doing what we're doing. When we take the time to understand, to love, and to inspire, We can make a huge difference in reaching people who have been wounded by abortion or experienced great suffering. At each conversation that you may have, always remember our goal, and that is to win over people, not arguments. People may not remember everything we say in a conversation, but they will remember two things: the evidence of what abortion does to preborn children and how you made them feel. It is truth and love that can change and heal our wounded culture. I hope that you guys can use these practical tips and suggestions when you're having a conversation about abortion, especially when someone you're speaking to is opening up about your own past sufferings or an abortion experience. It's so important that we're able to communicate that love, that care, and that we're able to share a message of healing and hope to our culture today. Thank you everyone for tuning in to this live stream. We hope that you will join us tomorrow for our closing live stream. And if you missed any of the past videos, again, they are available on our Facebook page and on our website. Thanks everyone and enjoy your evening.